Picture Europe in 1914. A tense playground of rival nations, each one watching the other with suspicion and unease. The continent was a patchwork of empires and kingdoms, all jostling for power, influence, and territory. The air was thick with competition, and beneath the surface, old grudges simmered, waiting for a reason to ignite. Armies marched through city streets, their uniforms crisp and their faces proud, as governments boasted about their military might and the size of their empires. The world's great powers were locked in an arms race, each determined not to be outdone by the others. Nationalism was everywhere. Every country thought it was the best. People cheered for their flags, sang patriotic songs, and believed their nation was destined for greatness. Newspapers and posters fueled these feelings, making the public eager to prove their country's strength. Behind closed doors, secret alliances tied everyone together, promising to defend each other if trouble started. These agreements were meant to keep the peace, but in reality, they created a web so tangled that one spark could set the whole thing ablaze. Into this mess walked Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, visiting Sarajevo, a city full of people who wanted independence. His visit was meant to show strength, but it only highlighted the deep divisions in the region. A group called the Black Hand, made up of Serbian nationalists, plotted to assassinate him. They believed that killing the Archduke would strike a blow for their cause and send a message to the world. On the day of the visit, chaos reigned. After a failed bomb attempt, fate intervened. The Archduke's car took a wrong turn and stopped right in front of Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins, who was standing outside a cafe, almost by chance. Princip seized the moment and shot the Archduke and his wife. In a matter of seconds, 2 lives were lost, but the consequences would ripple across the globe. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and made impossible demands, knowing Serbia could never agree to them all. The world held its breath as diplomats scrambled to prevent disaster, but the machinery of war was already in motion. When Serbia couldn't comply, Austria-Hungary declared war. Alliances kicked in. Russia backed Serbia, Germany backed Austria-Hungary, and France joined Russia, each nation mobilizing its armies and preparing for battle. Germany's invasion of Belgium brought Britain into the conflict, and soon nearly all of Europe was drawn in, unable to escape the commitments they had made. Like dominoes, Europe plunged into war. What began as a single act of violence in a distant city now pulled millions into a conflict that would reshape the world. The fighting was brutal and relentless. Trenches stretched for miles, artillery thundered day and night, and soldiers faced horrors no one had imagined. The old world was being torn apart. The world would never be the same. The spark in Sarajevo had set off a fire that would burn for years, leaving scars that would last for generations. As tensions erupted in 1914, Europe was split into 2 massive teams, known as the Allies and the Central Powers. These alliances weren't just political agreements, they were deep-rooted partnerships, forged by years of treaties, rivalries, and shifting loyalties. The fate of entire nations now hung in the balance as the continent prepared for war on a scale never seen before. The Allies, Britain, France, and Russia, formed the core of one side. They were soon joined by countries like Serbia, Italy, and Japan, each bringing their own ambitions and resources to the table. Later, the United States would enter the war, tipping the balance even further. These nations, though different in culture and language, were united by a common goal: to stop the expansion of their rivals and protect their interests. On the other side stood the Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria joined their ranks, hoping to regain lost glory and territory. Each member brought unique strengths, but also their own challenges and vulnerabilities, making the alliance both powerful and complex. Each side had its own advantages. Britain's navy ruled the seas, France's army was experienced and determined, and Russia could call upon vast numbers of soldiers. Germany, meanwhile, was renowned for its disciplined military and cutting-edge technology, making it a formidable opponent on the battlefield. Italy, initially allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, switched sides after being promised land and influence by the Allies. Japan, seeking to expand its reach in Asia, joined the Allies as well, hoping to gain new territories and prestige on the world stage. The Ottoman Empire, though past its prime, still controlled key territory at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Its involvement opened up new fronts and complicated the strategies of both alliances, making the conflict even more unpredictable. The war quickly spread beyond Europe's borders. Colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific were drawn in, as imperial powers called upon their overseas subjects to fight. Soldiers from India, Africa, Australia, and Canada found themselves on distant battlefields, making this a truly global conflict. Two giant alliances, locked in a deadly struggle, mobilized millions of men and resources. The world watched as the conflict escalated, with new weapons and tactics changing the face of warfare forever. The stakes had never been higher. Every nation involved knew that victory or defeat would reshape the world order, and the cost would be measured in millions of lives. As the world braced for a conflict unlike any before, families, soldiers, and leaders alike faced an uncertain future, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. At the start of World War I, generals confidently promised a swift and glorious campaign, assuring their men that the war would be over by Christmas. Young soldiers, full of hope and patriotism, marched off to battle expecting adventure and heroism. But instead of quick victory, they found themselves trapped in a grim reality. Endless lines of trenches stretching across the countryside, where months turned into years. The Western Front became a vast scar on the land, stretching for hundreds of miles. Despite countless offensives, the front barely shifted, and soldiers lived in a world where progress was measured in yards, not miles. Mud was a constant enemy, thick, sticky, and ever-present. After heavy rains, the trenches would flood, turning the ground into a sucking swamp that could swallow a man whole, making every step a struggle. The wet and cold led to trench foot, a painful condition that rotted flesh and sometimes forced doctors to amputate. Soldiers wrapped their feet in rags and smeared them with whale oil, but many still suffered. Rats, some as big as cats, thrived in the trenches. They feasted on leftover scraps, gnawed on equipment, and even fed on the bodies of the fallen, spreading disease and terror among the men. Lice were everywhere, burrowing into uniforms and bedding. The constant itching drove soldiers mad, and lice bites often led to trench fever, a debilitating illness that swept through the ranks. To fight back, soldiers sometimes burned their clothes over open flames, hoping to kill the pests. But relief was always temporary, and the lice always returned. Yet for many, the greatest enemy was not the mud or the vermin, but the crushing boredom. Days dragged on with little to do but clean rifles, repair gear, and write letters home, longing for news from loved ones. Then, without warning, terror would erupt, artillery shells screaming overhead, clouds of poison gas rolling in, or a sudden night attack shattering the uneasy calm. The endless cycle of mud, filth, fear, and exhaustion wore men down, both physically and mentally. Faces grew gaunt, eyes hollow from sleepless nights and constant anxiety. Life in the trenches was a daily struggle for survival, misery only interrupted by moments of sheer horror. Every explosion, every attack left its mark. The adventure they had been promised had turned into a living nightmare, and hope faded with each passing day. Few who survived the trenches would ever forget what they endured. The memories haunted them long after the guns fell silent. The trenches left scars on everyone who entered them, changing lives forever and shaping a generation. Survival in the trenches meant enduring more than just mud. Dawn and dusk were the most dangerous. Everyone stood ready for attack. Meals were cold, tasteless, and often muddy. Water tasted of fuel or chemicals. The constant noise, artillery, machine guns, and sniper fire never let up. Sleep was rare, nerves always frayed. Many soldiers suffered from shell shock, what we now call PTSD. The stench was unforgettable. Rotting sandbags, overflowing latrines, unwashed bodies, and the dead in no man's land. Every sense was assaulted, every day. The trenches left deep scars, physical and mental, on all who served. For many, the war never truly ended. The nightmare followed them home. The cost of survival was immense. Stalemate led to massive bloody battles, Verdun and the Somme in 1916. At Verdun, Germany tried to bleed France white with relentless attacks. 10 months of fighting turned the land into a wasteland. Hundreds of thousands died. To help the French, Britain launched the Somme offensive. A week-long bombardment failed. British troops walked into machine gun fire. The first day was the worst in British history, nearly 60,000 casualties. The battle dragged on for months with little ground gained. Over 2 million men were killed or wounded in these two battles alone. The scale of loss was staggering. These battles became symbols of the senseless slaughter of trench warfare. The cost was measured in lives, not territory. World War I unleashed terrifying new weapons. Poison gas choked and blinded. Gas masks became essential. Tanks, slow and unreliable at first, crushed barbed wire and terrified enemies. Airplanes evolved from scouts to fighters and bombers. Dogfights and bombing raids became common. The Red Baron and other aces became legends. Zeppelins bombed cities, bringing war to civilians. The conflict spread. Fierce battles raged on the Eastern Front, in the Middle East, Africa, and at sea. German U-boats tried to starve Britain by sinking supply ships. The war touched every continent and every ocean. Technology changed the face of battle forever. No one was safe from the reach of modern war. The world was learning just how deadly progress could be. The age of industrialized warfare had arrived. The war reached far beyond the trenches. Civilians were drawn in too. Governments used posters and songs to recruit, then turned to conscription when volunteers ran out. With men at war, women filled jobs in factories, farms, and offices, proving they could do anything men could. Rationing made food scarce. People queued for basics and grew their own in gardens. Cities faced air raids and blackouts. Fear and loss became part of daily life. Newspapers listed the dead. Every knock at the door brought dread. The home front was a battlefield of its own. The war changed society forever. By 1918, exhaustion gripped every nation. The Central Powers were collapsing, starved, rioting, and breaking apart. Russia quit after revolution. Germany moved troops west for a final push, but the arrival of fresh American forces turned the tide. Germany's last offensive failed. The Allies counterattacked with tanks and planes. The German army crumbled, revolution swept the country, and the Kaiser fled. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns finally fell silent. The war was over. Soldiers emerged from trenches, stunned by the quiet. The world was forever changed. The cost was unimaginable. The Great War had ended, but its scars would last. Why remember World War I? Because it reshaped the world. Ancient empires fell, new countries were born. The harsh Treaty of Versailles sowed seeds for future conflict, especially in Germany. The war's horrors changed society. Millions dead or wounded, women's roles transformed, and medicine advanced. Class barriers broke down. The world was never the same. We wear poppies to honor those who sacrificed everything. The war's lessons remind us of the true cost of conflict. Remembering helps us work for peace. It's a history we must never forget. The Great War's legacy lives on in every generation.